Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to keep a conversation going, the faster people seem to pull away from you? You over-explain, you force a smile, but you end up feeling completely invisible and entirely exhausted by the end of the day. You might think you are simply being nice or polite, but you are actually triggering a prehistoric defense mechanism in everyone you meet. Why does being incredibly accommodating usually result in being taken for granted, ignored, or even actively pushed out of the social circle? The truth is that your polite, over-apologizing, and immediate text replies are not being processed as kindness by their subconscious minds. Instead, you are broadcasting a loud, invisible signal of extreme vulnerability that guarantees the exact isolation you desperately want to avoid. To understand this brutal social paradox, we have to look at the evolutionary hardwiring of the human brain regarding tribal survival. For our ancient ancestors, being excluded from the tribe was not just an emotional inconvenience, it was a literal death sentence. Because of this primal history, our modern brains are programmed to panic the moment we feel even slightly left out or ignored. When you panic about being liked, your brain goes into overdrive and leaks what behavioral scientists call the social urgency signal. This invisible desperation stench is immediately detected by the people around you, and it fundamentally alters how they perceive your overall value. To the receiving brain, your eagerness does not look like friendliness. It looks like a weak member begging the tribe for resources. Every time you laugh too hard at a bad joke or over-explain a simple mistake, you are digging a deeper social grave. Replying to a text within 3 seconds every single time signals that your time has absolutely no alternative value or external demand. You are subconsciously telling them that you need their validation to survive, which makes them instinctually want to protect their own energy. The human mind is highly efficient at detecting when an interaction is draining, and it will ruthlessly cut off the energy leak. Your desperation forces their brain to erect massive defensive walls, pushing you away to protect the perceived strength of their inner circle. The tragic irony is that the harder you push for a genuine connection, the more superficial and transactional the relationship actually becomes. You trap yourself in an endless loop of people-pleasing, constantly scanning the room for a tiny crumb of approval that never arrives. They begin to treat your presence as a given, viewing your extreme kindness as a desperate negotiation tactic rather than genuine warmth. You become entirely invisible because predictability and constant availability destroy the very foundation of social magnetism and basic human curiosity. By sacrificing your own boundaries to accommodate their every whim, you eliminate the friction that makes interpersonal dynamics exciting and deeply valuable. This relentless pursuit of validation inevitably leads to severe emotional burnout, leaving you completely exhausted and isolated in a room full of people. If you are tired of playing emotional games and want to master the hidden mechanics of human behavior, subscribe to the channel now. Join us as we continue to decode the matrix of modern relationships and rewrite your brain for ultimate social leverage and unshakable confidence. To reverse this painful dynamic, we must first look at the neurological reality of how the brain processes interpersonal repulsion. Your peers do not consciously decide to dislike you. Their amygdala is simply categorizing your eager behavior as an emotional threat. When you present yourself as a bottomless well of free attention, the primitive brain flags you as an energetic parasite. It instinctively builds thick psychological walls because taking on a desperate tribe member meant draining limited resources and risking survival. This brings us to the mirror effect of perceived value, which dictates every single social hierarchy on the planet. The human mind operates on a strict economic principle. We only desire what appears scarce, independent, and hard to obtain. Think about a stray dog that constantly whines at your feet versus a rare exotic bird that ignores you entirely. You naturally ignore the guaranteed presence, but you will stop everything to capture the attention of the elusive creature. If you are constantly available, constantly agreeing, and constantly reaching out, your perceived value mathematically drops to absolute zero. You are flooding the social market with your own supply, turning your time and validation into a completely worthless currency. Because your validation is guaranteed, their brain entirely stops producing dopamine when they interact with you. They no longer have to work for your approval, which instantly kills any subconscious respect or genuine curiosity they had. So, how do you stop this vicious cycle and command the respect and connection you actually deserve in every room? You must immediately stop trying to convince their logical mind and start hacking their primitive neurological hardware instead. It is time to implement the tribal abundance posture and entirely short-circuit the defensive radar of everyone you meet. First, you must completely stop broadcasting scarcity by dropping that forced, high-pitched customer service voice you use to sound friendly. Instead, anchor yourself. Use a flat, calm tone and keep your physical posture entirely still and firmly grounded. This subtle physical shift sends a massive subconscious signal that you do not need this specific interaction to survive. By projecting absolute independence, you instantly transform from a draining energy vampire into a high-value, self-sustaining resource. Next, you must execute the reverse basal ganglia protocol before you even step foot into a crowded room. Manually reset your frontal lobe's expectation for external approval down to zero, entirely stripping away your emotional reaction to their judgment. By acting completely unbothered, you create a massive psychological vacuum in the conversation where your desperation used to be. Because you are no longer supplying the frantic emotional reaction their ego expects, their brain experiences a sudden deficit. Their basal ganglia will suddenly flip the script and begin aggressively craving your validation to fill that awkward void. Stop chasing connections, step back into your own power, and watch how quickly the world starts chasing you instead.